So I'll move on to introduce our 9 o'clock speaker, and pleasure to have a guest speaker today. Dr. Puneet Bhargava is a professor of radiology at the University of Washington. He is also editor-in-chief of Current Problems in Diagnostic Radiology. His work is focused on data analytics, organizational psychology, and workplace efficiency, including finding ways to incorporate business ideas to enhance clinical practice and clinician well-being. He's been recognized as an expert educator, has garnered a broad following on his YouTube channel, and we're very pleased to have him as a guest speaker today on the topic of personal finance for early to mid-career medical professionals. So Dr. Bhargava, please feel free to share your slides.
Thank you, Doc, for that kind introduction, Dr. Sangvi. I'll put up my slides, but I had some questions prepared that I was hoping we could project on the screen first. Which are kind of designed to get a lay of the land for all of us to see where we're at in our personal finance journey. Sometimes we need that extra impetus to get us going if we're stalling or not paying enough attention to our finances.
Sure, I can put those in the chat if you'd like, or
I think we had some poll questions prepared. They're just 3 simple ones.
Okay. Let me see. Let me see if I can launch a poll. Right now, I don't have polling capabilities.
Okay, if not, then I'll just get going.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. So my interest in personal finance is, like all of us in medicine, I found that increasingly I was working harder than I would have liked, not bringing a ton of energy home, and just sometimes there was a lot of loss of control over my life, and didn't really have enough time to do what I wanted to do. And one of the things in trying to get back control over my life was getting control over a personal finance situation. And I think it's really, really interesting that very, very smart physicians who can understand the most complex of topics just freeze up at the mention of the simplest personal finance idea, and yet continue to endure clinical work, sometimes beyond their capacity, and suffer from burnout. So this is kind of an approach. So here's the poll. So if you could just answer these 3 simple questions, it'll give us a lay of the land. Do you feel you're meeting your personal finance goals at the stage of the career you're at? Yes or no? And give us a sense of what is your current net worth, things you own, including your house, minus your mortgage, because you don't own the entire value on the house until your mortgage is paid off, obviously. And what is your financial independence number, sort of having a goalpost to what you're aiming towards? So we'll leave it up there for a few seconds. And then once we have the results, can we please post it? Okay, so you can see where most people are at. So you can see even amongst this group, more than 50% are have some concerns. 60% are meeting their goals, but 40% are not. And this is fairly typical for high income earners. that there's a high income but not a high savings rate. So the net worth of even mid-career professionals is rather low compared to the general population. And then you can see that the financial independence number is a little bit all over the place, and mostly because many of us haven't actually taken the time to plant the correct goalpost and don't really know what to base it off. So we'll talk about all of these things as we go through. So I have no disclosure. I don't work for any finance company. I'm just an MD like you guys. I read films. You guys do nephrology. I do radiology. And I have been learning a lot about personal finance. And there's around 3 hours of materials on the YouTube channel, which addresses all the finance questions, not just from the question of like what happened historically and what the math is and how to actually do it, but also from psychology. I'm not going to be discussing psychology in today's topic, but psychology is a huge part of how people manage their money, because how we're wired and how we respond to stress has an enormous impact on the outcome of our financial situation when we're close to retirement. So I'm only going to be talking about the Bogleheads model, which I'll explain what that is. It's basically index investing. I'll talk about some asset protection strategies, and I'll talk about the financial independence aspect and how it relates to combating burnout. So the first thing to know is that this doesn't come intuitively to most physicians. Almost everyone makes mistakes, and that's cool. And especially making mistakes early in your career is great, because the losses from those mistakes are only a few $1,000s and not in the millions. So you want to make smaller mistakes, small stakes mistakes, and learn earlier in your life than making the same mistakes later, because they may cost a whole lot more. Just a different level of adding insult to injury if you haven't learned early on in your career. So my biggest mistake was I invested in a variable annuity. And this is, if any one of you has a variable annuity, I would highly recommend that you get, just like we get second medical opinions, get a second financial opinion. And variable annuities, the problem is that there's really expensive funds in there, and there's high commissions being paid out. And so the people who, so annuities are not bought, they're sold. That's what is the dictum in the finance industry. So if somebody has it, you have been sold. I was sold one. By the time I got out of it, I had lost about $30,000. And that was my wake-up call. That forced me to say, okay, enough is enough. I can't trust a personal finance professional here with my hard-earned money. I'm just going to learn this myself. It's not that hard. So I did. I think the problem with doctors is that we think that we're very smart, and our smartness in the medical domain will translate perfectly into the finance side of things. And this idea happens subconsciously, and there's this idea of domain dependence here. We're very good in our domain, which is medicine. Outside of medicine, we're not that good. So I think if we embrace personal finance with humility, that this is not our forte, and seek help and guidance and put in the reading. I will recommend some reading resources at the end, very simple ones, and try not to overcomplicate things, and try not to invest in things that we can't really understand. We'll do just fine. So, no secrets here. A lot of us graduate with, a few $100,000 of medical loans. And the highest that I've heard is we have a resident who told me that by the time he graduated medical school, he had $450,000 of loans. And so straight away we finish our fellowship, we become an attending, and we become very entitled. And immediately it's time to buy the doctor's car to reflect, our prestigious jobs that we do. A simple car won't do anymore. And of course, the next step is a beautiful house, because if we're working this hard, we need to come home to a beautiful house. So we go beyond our means. And very quickly, we realize that we're paying a lot of money for our home mortgage, and a big chunk of our salary is going to the bank, essentially. We have high transportation costs, and these are the only three big things that actually can derail your finance situation. The final being food, right? So how much do you eat out? How much, what expensive restaurants do you go to? And if you're only into organic food, that is sold at the priciest of retailers. So with these three things, they can really, if you're doing all three, it's probably could be derailing your financial situation. And then, of course, a lot of credit cards start coming in the mail, because they figure out that this is someone who's making a high income. And pretty quickly, you could end up in a lot of debt. And 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 then it seems like, you've put in a few years of attending work, and it's not making any difference. Your net worth really isn't growing. Some people just give up and don't even know what their net worth is. But the point is, we all have to start somewhere. Hopefully, people have started already, but if there's really young people listening here, you got to start. And how do you start? You start really, really small. And so even $1, $10 here, $10 there, it all adds up, and you start investing. And I see overt focus on amongst healthcare professionals on, oh, how much do you get, how much do you earn? And oh, I found a higher paying job. And yes, income is a part of it, but more important than income is, what's your cash flow situation? What assets do you hold? Are you tracking your net worth, and is it growing? Income is just one of the things that affects your finance situation later on in your career. So I think there's a lot of focus on just income. There's a lot of other things to focus on that we don't pay enough emphasis to. So ultimately, most people are so busy that they're not tracking their savings. Hardly anyone is ever budgeting, and we buy expensive homes, especially in a city like Seattle, and many of us think that our home is an investment. If those of you who really do think that your home is an investment, I recommend you check out New York Times rent versus buy calculator. And if you put in your own numbers, many of you will realize that even in our situation, renting might be cheaper than buying. I'm not saying renting is the way to go. I highly recommend owning, especially if you have a family, if you have kids. Even if you don't, a house gives you stability. So there's different reasons for owning a home. It is not always the best investment. So all of us are in debt. And some of us want to get out of it. Some of us have multiple debts. There's two different strategies. So one is the debt snowball effect, and then is the avalanche method. So the bottom line is, you've got to pay your basics on all the debts that you're using. But the bottom line is, if you pay off the smallest debt you owe to anyone, you decrease the number of debts that you have. And sometimes that, for certain type of personalities, is an impetus to pay down other debt. Financially, it doesn't make any sense, but psychologically, it sometimes works better for some people. So figure out what is your plan of attack for the multiple debts if you have them. So once you have a plan for tackling debt, you got to think about building wealth. So if you've started making a higher salary, you've graduated, you have your first job, if you can defer lifestyle bloat for just a few years, you would do really, really well to set yourself up. And it's crazy the amount of increase in pay we get from trainee to becoming an attending, and it's easy to grow into that high income overnight. But if you could grow slowly into that actually does set you up. And then when you get a paycheck, think about paying yourself first, which is basically putting your money in for your future self first. and then for any other things that you had in mind for that month. And I think there's a lot of some of you may have heard of the FIRE community, financial independence, retire early, especially with the bull market that was on for over a decade. This FIRE concept really kind of exploded on the finance scene. And people were really putting in money into the stock market in the hope that they would reach their financial independence numbers and be able to potentially retire early, or at least have options to if they wanted to. So before you actually go investing in the stock market, I think it's very important to have an emergency fund. So for example, if your car got totaled, or your roof of the house needed an immediate replacement, or there were urgent medical bills, I think it's recommended that you have 3 to 6 months of savings set aside for those kind of emergency needs. And there's a lot of options. And with the Fed doing what it's doing, maybe the interest rates in some of these accounts will start to go up just a little bit. But the point here is that you're not trying to make a ton of money here. This is just the money for emergencies. Now, it's easy to give up on saving because you're cutting out on the lattes, you're saving $10 a year, and the net worth isn't budging, and people throw in the towel. And especially if your income isn't that high, if you're in training, or you can only work part-time, or whatever the situation might be. And I think this graph shows that accumulating the first million is really, really hard. It actually takes an inordinate amount of time, several years, to get to the first million. And for some people, maybe a million is too far off, and think about it as the first 100,000, or maybe the first 250K, whatever it might be. But it's only after you've actually saved a sizable sum of money and you have invested it, would any significant movement in the stock market actually change your net worth significantly in any sort of way to impact your life. But suffice to say that if you're starting out, it's going to take a long time to see any kind of momentum sort of kick in. It takes a long time. So what's the Buglehead strategy? So the Buglehead strategy is basically focused on index investing. So you're not actually picking stocks, you're just investing in the stock market. You're focusing on index funds, which can be invested in pretty cheaply. And you focus on your net worth, you invest early and often, you don't try to time the market, you stay in the market, let the markets do its thing, and the market will eventually settle, and they keep you're hoping that everybody getting up and going to work every single day will take the economy forward, and that's the bet you're making. So this is actually my favorite personal finance blog post of all time. It's on a blog called Mr. Money Mustache, and if you Google this heading, the simple math behind early retirement, you're going to find this blog post. And this is a table from this blog post that actually changed everything for me. So when you actually go to a financial advisor, they're going to give you the standard spiel, which is save 10 or 15%, and you'll do just fine, and don't worry about it. And if you're saving 50%, that's great. Look at these numbers. If you save 15%, you have to work for 43 years. Imagine if you started your career mid-30s at 43 to that. Do you really want to sleep? Is that the age you want to sleep peacefully at night the first time, knowing that you're financially secure? That's not me. Now, of course, as you edge up your savings more and more, it's not easy. But if you're able to, then you can be financially secure much faster. For example, if you could save 60% of your income, I know it's a tall order, very hard, but if you potentially could, you'd be done in 12 and a half years. And from that point on, you've taken money out of the equation in your life. And certainly this 10 to 15% advice doesn't apply to people who have spent over a decade in school and who have missed out on the compounding that other people have been putting into their 401k, all these years while we have spent our years in training. There's also a very interesting calculator called the FireCalc, which just you have to put in how much you spend every year, what kind of portfolio do you aim for, and you have to make a guess of how many years you're going to live and how many years in retirement you expect this money to fund. And it basically uses data from the previous years to give you a percentage likelihood of how likely your money is going to last. So you can get a rough idea as to, if you're, especially if you're late career, if you have enough. Again, nobody really knows what's going to happen in the future. This actually kind of stopped me for a long time when I was starting out, because I was overtly fixated on my asset allocation model and trying to tweak it. You only need this after you have a substantial amount of money. If you're just starting out, you can just put it in the total stock market index fund, ticker symbol. Ticker symbol is basically a abbreviation for these investment vehicles, VTSAX, and then you can kind of build on it. You can take a picture of it. I sent links to the full version of this talk that I can't accommodate in half the time, where I talk about this a little bit more, but in the middle is kind of what I do. And notice that as you grow older, you kind of decrease the risk in the stock market. And some people even say that if you've won the game, then you don't necessarily have to play the game. But I know it's personal finance, one size doesn't fit all. It is very personal. So why low-cost index funds, right? Why index funds? Because if you actually went with a financial advisor and started picking stocks, and you paid 1.5% to 2% fee, Vanguard has done calculation that if you paid your advisor and commissions and everything approximately 2%, you actually gave away 40% of your account to them over the course of your investment journey. I don't want to give up 40% of all I make over the course of my career to my advisor. I'm sorry. So that guy, even though as nice as he was fired a long time ago. So start to think about 3 different types of money in your taxable account, which you can access at any point, but you will be paying long or short-term capital gains on that money, depending on how long you own it. Tax deferred are things like 401k, which you haven't really paid taxes on, but you will pay taxes on them when you retire and withdraw. Hopefully less taxes, because the income at that point wouldn't be a full-blown income, but it could be even more than what you make if your investments did great. So that is also a leaky bucket. The only non-leaky bucket is kind of your Roth 401ks, in which these are there's a small limit to them, $6,000 for this year per person, because the government is saying, well, you can invest these $6,000 however you want, and they can become several million. We'll never tax you on it. So that bucket will be actually a smaller bucket. So there's a lot of money we can put into several of these accounts. So UW has a 401k account, which has a limit of $20,500 for somebody less than 50. We also have a pension plan. We have a health savings plan, which is a triple tax advantage account, which is something I would consider looking into, especially if you have no chronic health problems, and you can put in $7,300 for a family. A lot of physicians actually miss out on the backdoor Roth IRA if you don't do them. You can always call Vanguard and get on the phone with an agent and say, well, walk me through a backdoor Roth IRA. I'm ready to contribute. And we have a deferred compensation plan as state employees. And if you have established an LLC, and if you have any consulting activities, notice that the amount you can contribute there is much, much higher, because now these are small business tax rules that actually apply. So you can see that there's a lot of options, and many of us leave some on the table. And then once you've kind of crossed this hurdle, you got to think about how to invest your money efficiently. So this is This is from a table that's widely available online, where you want to put funds that give a lot of dividends inside 401k and some even in Roth, but not so much in your taxable account, so that you don't have to give a big piece of it to Uncle Sam every year. But at the end of the day, if you're just investing in a 3-fund portfolio, it's been shown to do just as well. You can rebalance ongoing every month and major rebalances once a year. And remember, there's a lot of drama going on right now. There's been a lot of drama if you've asked your parents and grandparents in the past as well. But the stock market always recovers. The panic always settles down, and the economy always keeps plodding along. So as long as you can think big picture, you'll actually do just fine. And if you're investing, thinking that you'll do great in 5, 10, or even 15 years, I hate to disappoint you. But if you are invested for a long horizon over the course of your career, you will do just fine. So this is called an investor policy statement. Very few physicians actually know about them or have one. And this is something that you would write. You don't need somebody. Basically, you think about how much money do you intend to have before you hit retirement? When do you want to go part-time by, if you want to? When do you want to have enough money? How are you good? It's basically your own philosophy about money. And this is something you would refer to when you're really stressed, such as, when the Dow drops several hundred points in a day and you're like looking at your portfolio like, oh my God, I just lost, 6 months of my savings right there. This is what you would come back to and say, okay, no. I'm not going to react for what I'm seeing in the news. I'm just going to go by what I agreed to and made a pact with myself. Everybody needs a disability insurance policy. We do have one at UW. Many of us own personal policies as well. I have a smaller policy myself. Term life insurance is the only life insurance that most people advise. And you can have a policy. You can ladder them. So instead of having $1, $2, or $3 million policy, which is pretty standard because they're not very expensive, you can actually have 2 or 3 of these policies for the same amount, and you keep canceling 1 or 2 as you grow older. And then once you hit your finance numbers, you can actually cancel all these policies and self-insure. And finally, have a will and an estate plan, especially if you have assets, more importantly, kids, because if you don't have a plan for them, the state has a plan, which is to take over your kids if you don't make a plan to decide who should have your kids if both of you end up in let's say, a car accident or something. And to get your kids back, or for your family, is a very expensive process called probate. So making a will and an estate plan is highly recommended. I'm not going to get into physician side hustles and why it can make and expedite your financial situation, improve it really quickly. But there's an article, if you search on PubMed, you'll find it. And inside that article is a table on how there's some tax benefits to side hustles. And then you can basically, once you start doing really well financially, you can cut back, you have more negotiation power. I've actually seen older colleagues who really have enough money speak up loudly in the department when they don't agree with some of the policies, and I think it helps them kind of cut back when they want. They have more negotiation because they really don't need every single dollar on offer. And in terms of books, I think these 3 books, if you can read, they're very simple. I'm into audiobooks, so I kind of listen to them, and they really did teach me a ton. And I think quite a bit about psychology and how to think when you're really stressed. So think about these simple things, and then instead of thinking, oh, how much am I making, and being very focused on that, move on to a net worth mentality. Know how much money is actually, what is your cash flow situation? So how much do you make, how much do you spend, and invest early. And then have an asset protection strategy, and then over time craft your job to what you want out of life, to improve your wellness. And you can only do that once you've actually learned some personal finance basics. So there's about 3 hours of content on the channel. You feel free to go and explore. I also have from productivity topics and wellness topics on there for those who are interested in them. I know time's run out, but I'm happy to take 1 or 2 quick questions.
Great, thank you so much for that. And I will open it up to people. If you want to put questions in the chat, raise your hand or just unmute yourselves, feel free.
So while people are typing questions, my focus in this talk was to encourage people to do better. All of us can do better. I think many of us actually don't do everything that's on offer, which is literally like leaving money on the table. So one of the questions is, you can do 401k or the pension as fellows and attending. So I think, yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, my question was just like, I guess I'm just curious to hear how people have, sort of thought about this decision of when to, yeah. So I have nothing more than what I typed, so I'm sorry, I'll stop talking.
I think the pension plan, UW puts in money in our pension plan. It's not something we control. It's like a matching 9%, maxed out at I think $305,000 for the year. So until you hit that cap, they'll match your salary. And so you wanna, because you're not going to get that money until you're 59 and a half. So might as well be very aggressive with that money is what I would say. At least put it in the S&P index, but try not to put in too much bonds and whatnot, because they're not going to grow. And then 529 plans. So Washington State has a 529 plan, but that was kind of in limbo for a while. So any 529 plan is fine. I know the one from New Hampshire is highly recommended because of low cost, and the 529 New York plan is great. My money for my kids is in the New York State plan. Again, you can have your 529 plan in any state, because we don't get a tax deduction to 529 contributions because we don't have state tax. So you can put in your money anywhere. Again, it's a philosophical decision depending on how much money you want to, how much you want to fund your kids' education per se. Some people want to fund it fully. Some people want to say, I'll only fund college. Some people have a dollar amount in mind. But suffice to say that if you're going to do it sooner, so that you allow that money to grow, and not like 2 years before they're about to hit college, right? I mean, that's not very, very helpful. And you don't have to do a lump sum. You can just say, well, I'm just going to do $100 a month or $50 a month, whatever. Start slow. And then once you see the impact compounding has, you're going to start increasing the amount. So, a lot of people freeze up with some of these ideas because they're like, oh my God, this is too much. So I'm just going to defer it. And then they do nothing. Well, something is better than nothing anyway. So, get started. And, if you can't do it yourself, get some help. If you need an advisor, get a fee-only advisor, somebody who charges you by the hour and doesn't take 1.5% to 2% of the money you're investing in with them. That's not the right way of doing it. But read these books. It's not that hard. I mean, I went from making $30,000 mistakes to doing this myself. So I can do it. You can too.
Great. Just because we're a little bit over time, I think we'll stop our Q&A there. It is possible you are going to get emails from many of us.
I'm happy to. Feel free to swing by Radiology, or if you want to have a phone conversation, I'm happy to. This is something that I can always give my opinion. I am not a financial advisor. So, but I have been putting in a ton of reading. I will tell you that if you just listen to some of the videos that I've made and listen to it on your commute, because it's hard to find the time otherwise. Instead of, what's going on around the world, it's pretty depressing. Then you might end up learning something, and go slow, make a list. Things that you want to do, whether it be investing in inflation bonds or whatever, go slow, do one activity a week. But definitely start with disability and life insurance. Make a plan for that. Open a taxable account. Start investing some money, whatever you can, even $25. Just wet your feet. Do your backdoor Roth IRA or Roth IRA, depending on how much you make, and get going. It really does make a huge difference.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We'll
Thank you.
adjourn our nephrology grand rounds. Thank you everyone for your participation.